With me today is Electra Johnson, who is running for Colorado Senate District 12 and is also the chair of the local El Paso County Democratic Party. Thanks for joining me today, virtually,
Oh,
yet
you're so
again,
welcome.
during this, pandemic time. I think the first thing I kind of want to ask is kind of your positions and why you're running for that Colorado Senate District 12 position.
Yeah, so I am the local chair of the El Paso County Democratic Party. I am also the vice chair of CD5 and Judicial District 4, and I'm a precinct organizer in my precinct. But I decided to step up for Senate District 12, one, because nobody else stepped up for that House District breakout seat. But second, the main reason I stepped up to run for Senate District 12 is because it's a heavily gerrymandered district, but it overlaps all three of our county commission candidates who are running. It overlaps at least three of our House district candidates that are running, and it also is one of the areas of the county that has the biggest concentration of non-voters. So it's an area that I really want to concentrate on to organize to really move the dial forward. I feel like it's a pretty important one because of all those overlaps. And I'm not going into it with any kind of illusions about it being necessarily a winnable district. My goal really is to push the dial forward and to get, if not definitely more progressives elected, but definitely also hopefully some women elected too. We have only male representation in our county, and 90% of our volunteers in the party are female. So trying to sort of right the balance there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so I've heard from a few other people as well that we've interviewed the idea that like a lot of our districts and areas around here are pretty heavily gerrymandered. And I thought that there was like an independent council that was going to be um, was going to gather to basically try to like ungerrymander certain areas.
Yes.
Um, so is that that's not going to happen? So for this election, but for future elections, is that
Yeah,
the idea?
so that's the other reason that I thought I would run for this seat, just to put a highlight. There's never been any Democrat that I know of who's run specifically for this seat and made any kind of progress whatsoever. There is an incumbent. Um, but I really wanted to highlight how how the lines have been drawn in this district, because it starts out, if you're familiar with Colorado Springs or El Paso County specifically, it starts out up in Skyway near Cheyenne Canyon, goes down to Broadmoor Bluffs, out towards Pikes Peak Community College, all the way out towards Falcon, towards Fountain, and then up towards Falcon. And I have a visitor here. Up towards Falcon. Here's my visitor. Up towards Falcon and over towards Peterson Air Force Base. So it's a massive U that basically cuts a big chunk of House District 18 and leaves sort of the center section. So it's just a giant U that covers a
Interesting.
massive portion of the county. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, like the other question ultimately I have as well um, is are there still areas that are considered unwinnable? Because I know that there's been shifts of the parties in Colorado Springs in the last couple of decades for sure, but specifically in the last decade, where there's been a growing number of unaffiliates and a slightly growing number of Democrats and kind of a stagnant number of registered
Yeah.
Republicans. Ultimately, I guess my question is, what are we kind of trying to do to reach out to unaffiliates, or do we kind of know why they decided to not register to one of the parties?
Oh, well, I mean, just looking at this from a really honest point of view and an honest perspective, people are sick of politics. They're sick of they're sick of the division of parties. They're sick of how the parties are basically not representing people. That's the biggest piece. And so to me, it's a pretty obvious reality that parties have been representing themselves. They haven't been necessarily there as a representative for everybody. I think in a certain case, Polis, our governor, is doing a really phenomenal job trying to represent everybody in the most equitable way he can. But and also gets a lot of criticism from the left and from the right for doing that. But I think that more and more people are just sick of partisan politics. They're sick of the ugliness of the world. There are less young people involved with politics, and certainly with partisan politics. My moment in 2016, after I lost in the county commission election, which I literally got involved in because of Bernie, my moment there was basically, do I want to leave the party that I've been a member of forever? I've been a Democrat since I registered to vote. Or do I want to reform it? And the reality is, to get on the ballot in the majority of the states, because most of our representatives are Republicans or Democrats, you have to choose a party. And I think that where we're going, we're in a really tremendously interesting time, which is a huge flip of where we've been. We're in sort of entering the seventh wave of political parties, and that shift has to do with a lot of different things, and a lot of those shifts within parties have and within the parties. I mean, a really clear example of that is the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, was the party of, and was the party that basically went to war over slavery. And then the Democratic Party was the party 1964 passed the Civil Rights Act. So there have been these major cultural shifts, and we're in one of those right now. So, and there's not anybody writing the script of this shift. That's the reality. That's why we're, in those scripts of the shifts, like this one obviously is defined by something, a global pandemic is one part of that cultural shift. Another one is the real polarization of nationalism and socialism, and how do we take care of people, or how do we take care of our own? That's sort of the conversation between that duality. And that shift is something that we have to come to terms with that. But for me, my real reckoning point was, I'm not going to make any strides starting my own party or doing anything like that without actually starting to influence one of those major parties, because they've set up the rules in such a way that no other minor party can make any inroads right now, like getting on the ballot. And that's really what it comes down to, is getting people elected.
Yeah, and I think, that you bring up a really interesting point, because that's definitely, at this point in the national elections, there's been, kind of I'd say just a kind of a depression in the progressive movement. At least a lot of people are kind of fed up and kind of have to think, well, should we try to split off and create a new party? Which you brought up several points, and I think if we just look at American history in general, third parties typically have their struggles, and I think you can make an argument that with the way technology is, there's a chance that something like that could be effective, but I think ultimately it would require, like you said, a revamp of the entire system. Yeah. And the system is built for two parties because that's the way it's been in American history, forever. And so then what's the other option? The other option then is transforming one of the parties, the Democratic Party. And I think here in El Paso County, we've been extremely successful in that, getting a lot of progressives into positions of authority and power in the Democratic, local Democratic scene. And I'm kind of curious then about like your perspective of how you view the current progressive movement, as well as, what kind of the future is.
Yeah, I think the progressive movement is, I think, in many ways doing what, for instance, what the Working Families Party is doing. Like, working families will endorse Democratic candidates. Democratic Party members can also sort of support working families' ideas and ideology. But I think if you look at the arc of where we started, where we have been, and there have been three-party systems and party switches. There was a point in our history where the Whigs were going to become like a big part of like our national history instead of the Republicans. Like, there have been a lot of switches within the parties, but for the most part it has been a two-party system, and certainly in my lifetime it's only been a two-party system. The progressive movement, what I see is one of the things that I draw some of my resourcing from is like, for instance, in Iceland, there was this 12-year period where there were literally no women in office when women started trying to take back and make sure that women's issues and environmental issues were part of the platform. And of course, Iceland is, smaller than El Paso County, population-wise. But I see it as the arc of change, the arc of ideas, the arc of accepting ideas. When I ran in 2016 for county commissioner in El Paso County, you can even say the word sustainable, which in my profession as in architecture has been, it was like we were moving on to regenerative. Like, sustainable wasn't even part of the conversation. It's like, yeah, we can sustain a system that's not working, so why don't we move into something that's actually regenerating? So you couldn't even say sustainable because it was such a heavily Republican county. And the conversation around healthcare for all, the conversation around student loan debt, the conversation around climate change has so significantly shifted. And I think we're still moving that. Like, I think we're about halfway through. I don't think that, like, yeah, it would be great if the end of this term, of Trump's term, and he has done so much damage to our judiciary. He has done so much damage on so many levels to so many different parts of our country, from the gutting the EPA to, I mean, just what he's done, like taking the relevance out of science, the Mueller report. I mean, like, the list is, you just keep unfolding it. It's so much damage. So to me, I see that what we were going for with Bernie was the ultimate. We were going for the big gains right now. But what Bernie has done is shift that conversation so significantly that you hear at least the echoes of it even on Fox News. I mean, we've gone this very weird full circle, especially in this county, that I've seen, where it's like the crazy left-wing anti-vaxxing hippies, like that, not that I grew up with, but certainly that I know, have somehow met the preppers, the Christian fundamentalist preppers, and they're all eating their outdated food in their underground bunkers or whatever, but they're like suddenly, like, this conversation about 5G being like, these conspiracy theories have gone full circle, where the two sides of crazy have suddenly, like, met one another, the left and the right, and all of these other pieces are just kind of trickling down. So I don't think that the progressive movement has lost its path or lost its way. If anything, Bernie has been that North Star for many, many people, and the things that he's said have been the things that have ignited people. I mean, every single candidate, for the most part, was talking about parts of his platform on the stage regarding the presidential election. And some were sort of backing away certain areas and other areas, but for the most part, the things that we couldn't even talk about 4 years ago have become like relatively mainstream conversations. And I think that that is a huge win. I think that there is some difficulties, obviously, coming around the old white guy. I mean, Bernie's an old white guy too, but he's got a lot of progressive ideas. Biden, I mean, my main problem with Biden really is part of my main problem with, you know, old white guys of that generation in general. My generation, I'm 47. When a pervert would come into the room, we just sit down so our ass wasn't grabbed. Now, like, you know, it's our president or our, you know, president-elect, and certainly our president. And instead of throwing everything out and going for that full vigilante justice, which I support on some level, sometimes we have to like move things. You know, in another 4 years, most of these people are going to be dead. And or so old they're not able to govern. I can't even imagine Biden in 4 more years, you know, or 8 more years. And so those conversations are shifting.
Yeah.
And as far as the progressive movement goes, we have to keep our focus. It's so easy, especially, I mean, for me, it's very easy because I put my whole heart into what I do. I put my whole heart into the political work that I do because I really believe we can do better. We can do better for the future of our planet. We can do better for our kids. We can do better. We can take better care of each other. We can do better for each other across the board. But I believe that we're moving in that direction. It's just not going fast enough with the crises that we're dealing with on a day-to-day level. And those crises are based in science. Those crises are based in food science. They're based in viral science. They're based in, you know, in the spread of disease. Obviously, they're based in climate change issues, but the solutions are also based in some of those things too. I mean, like using everything from like cleaning up our air and water with like we're pushing things with like understanding mushrooms, cleaning up Superfund sites, those kinds of things, understanding like multimodal transportation and the need to actually invest in our infrastructure. There's a lot of these push and pull pieces that are in balance. And I think the real disconcerting and kind of anxiety producing piece has to do with that we don't have a really clear vision of where we're going. But I think that the progressive movement can own that and create that clear vision. Take the Green New Deal. Take the Green New Deal and outline for people how our culture looks, where we are going, what this looks like in these changes. And Bernie, I love Bernie dearly, but one of the failings that I saw him do in this election versus the last one is he was like, I've said this 4,000 times, I'm not going to explain it. No, sometimes you need to break it down because there are new people listening. You need to carry people along with you on the journey and let them know how you're going to do this. You know, from a financial perspective, from all of these perspectives, how are these things going to shift? And I think that where we are as a progressive movement, we can be that North Star and that guiding light. And I think AOC on some level has been that for a lot of people. She is so clear and so concise and fighting for people and fighting for the future in a way that isn't selling out to power. And that's where we need to be. That's where we need to be as the progressive movement. So
Yeah, and I think that I think you're right in the sense too that the conversations, just like in the debates and just in the political spectrum at all, like you had to have a stance on Medicare for all. Like you had to at least discuss it. I mean, and think about in 2016, the discussions that were going on in regards to Medicare for all and aggressive attacks of aggressive action against climate change as well. Like that wasn't even really part of the dialogue. Where now it has to be, and even You know, we're starting to see shifts where Biden's campaign is trying to, you know, do what they can to bring the progressive movement on their side. And, you know, even though he's a pretty big moderate, he's still trying to take some action to appease some of the progressive ideals. I think ultimately the question is specifically, especially for climate change, is, you know, will it be fast enough? Because, you know, there's that in itself is, you know, one of those things that really can't wait, like potentially other things, at least in sense of like kind of what we're seeing now, and what we've seen in other global disasters, natural disasters. But that's ultimately, I think, the biggest worry that I have is, Medicare for all is of course essential, and it saves lives. But America not passing that doesn't necessarily mean that the planet burns up, right? Versus like aggressive action of climate change, like that does keep people up at night, and it does affect the entire world and really potentially our survival. So kind of, I think that AOC being kind of a really strong advocate for that and a really good role model, and especially representing diversity, is incredibly important, because that's something I think that we've lacked as a movement in the past. Where, like you said, Bernie, you know, has the right policies, but I think having the next level of diversity is incredibly important, and really played well in his. You saw in his latest campaign as well how some of his messaging and platform shifted to accommodate and really try to bring in more diversity, and try to, you know, try to incorporate elements that of minority communities as well. Thinking specifically like on his drug platform.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess my last really question then is, you know, what can people do locally? Because ultimately, you know, there's people are kind of have their decisions on what they want to do at a national level, but like locally, what can you do to really change a Democratic Party or a local chapter to be more progressive?
Well, if there's ever been a test case, it's certainly our county, on what you can do to change a Democratic platform and also change a Democratic Party and make it more progressive. Get involved. I mean, honestly, we need more young voices. We need people to put their heart into this, to get involved, and to know what's resting on it. I think that the Democratic Party is a vehicle for change. It's also a living body. It's not my party any more than it's yours or anyone else's. It's our party. And regardless of if you're a Democrat or not, to me, getting involved and voting, I think there's been some massive shifts with Prop 107 and 108 and having unaffiliated voters vote. I think we have one of the best models in our state of any state. We have mail-in ballots. We include unaffiliated voters. We are going more towards including unaffiliated voters. Both parties cannot win without the unaffiliated vote. They have to reach out to people. But we also have to create a really clear vision. People are not going to just step up and get involved in a party because you say, get involved in the party. It's better than that other party. That isn't very enticing to anyone, and certainly not Democrats. Democrats and progressives especially do things because they believe in them. They do things because it's creating a future that is look, you've got cat ears right behind you.
Yeah, no, I got my cat.
Yeah, my dog keeps bringing stuff in for me to fetch. He's bringing his bone and throwing it at my feet. But we have got to create a very clear vision of where we're going, and a vision that includes other people. I mean, first of all, with climate change, 4 years ago, and now I've got an 8-year-old, I had a 4-year-old then. my kid is so aware of the issues around climate change. And it's not just because I'm his mother. His friends are too, that might have much more conservative parents. And I think it's becoming part of that conversation. The reality is, to really make change, we need younger people getting involved and voting. And that is the biggest problem. That was the problem with caucusing, and that's the problem with all of those other things where there aren't necessarily young people getting involved and voting. And obviously, had more young people gotten involved, Bernie would have been carried a lot further. I think his message last time in 2008, people were so hungry for it that he literally had the tide. And I have to say, the hubris from the establishment of just sort of like, well, that's not going to happen, has shifted. I think that the Biden campaign is really trying to learn. And I have to say that as much as I struggle with Biden being the presumptive nominee, and I can say that as myself, as a chair, I'm supposed to be neutral, but of course I'm also, Bernie delegate and all of those things. I think that he realizes, or at least his campaign realizes, he can't repeat this like, well, shut up and just get involved. That's not going to work. It didn't work last time. And it's not Democrats who are selling out Democrats. A lot of people who got involved because of Bernie were unaffiliated. A lot of people were progressive. A lot of people were not necessarily involved in the Democratic Party at all. And he carried people into the conversation with the things he was talking about, because he was talking about the things that people are really dealing with. I mean, and dealing with more and more. We have so much income inequality right now. And this virus has just put a finer and finer and finer light on that income inequality. We have, Governor Polis was just talking before this. I was listening to his live feed about this update about the coronavirus, and it's 40% of our state is living paycheck to paycheck. There is a disconnect in understanding between people who have a pension, who have had their college loans paid off, who paid maybe what Bernie paid to go to, was City College in Brooklyn or whatever it was where he went. I'm sorry, I went to architecture school and I started out owing $57,000. I now owe $69,000 after paying $500 a month for the last 15 years. And my sister, who's a doctor, owes $350,000. And yeah, she makes a lot more money than me as a doctor, but she's also right now at a lot more risk too. Sweetheart, no, that's a $600 Lego kit. You can't save your money up for it.
It's gonna be a lot of Christmases and birthdays.
I know, we could use all your Legos and build that. But okay, stop. I'm talking. Okay. I'm talking. This is not a hustle time. This is not hustle your mom.
Seems like that's the best time to maybe get in a hustle.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You're distracted.
Yeah, he stole my phone yesterday and was during the executive committee meeting when I couldn't scold him because I was running the meeting and trying to answer all the questions online and doing everything at the same time. He stole my phone and sat under my desk and was eating like hidden stolen Easter candy. But yeah, I think we have a really, it doesn't feel like a clear path, but we have a clear path. And that clear path is this. We have to explain in a very generous way that takes like your grandma and gets your grandma on board with like why climate change is important, like, and how we're going to do it. Why, my father-in-law is a staunch, hardcore Republican, and we disagree on just about everything. And we respectfully disagree most of the time, and then sometimes he gets under my skin and I can't handle it for a couple of days. But there are certain things, like one of his very best friends down in Del Norte is a beekeeper, and he's seen hive collapse. He grew up in, I mean, my husband was raised up in Summit County. Half the trees are dead up there. I mean, climate change is real. There's no joke about climate change. And when we start actually clearly laying out what this path looks like, what does the Green New Deal mean to everyday people? What does that look like? And it's not just like everyone driving Teslas, because I hate to say it, but I'm not going to be able to afford a Tesla with, student loan debt and, my whole industry collapsing. But what what we can do is we can start talking about things like local foods, supporting local foods. We can start talking about how we protect watersheds, how we start doing, there's a lot of things that we can do locally. Not buying $600 Lego sets that end up in plastics in the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah.
So laying out that vision is really important.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we got to end it because we're
got it.
try to keep it somewhat tight. But ultimately, the way I always think of it too, I think what makes me what I try to do is stay positive is this platform, the progressive platform, Medicare for All, Green New Deal,
yes.
Student loan debt forgiveness and elimination, and free college. Those are all extremely popular programs. Those are popular with independents. They're popular with Democrats, and they're even popular somewhat with Republicans. A decent number. So like the idea that like if it was one thing, like if these policies weren't popular in the eyes of the American public, but I think the American public realized that these are necessities and that our country is falling behind because we don't implement them.
But that shifted from 2008 till now. Think about where it's going to be 4 years from now.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be policy.
Yeah, and people like like myself and a lot of my friends have begun a lot more politically active because of having insane student loan debt and not being able to afford medical care when we have an issue. So I think there is hope, and I think that what we're doing, and specifically as well as what you've done with the local chapter, is incredibly encouraging. So thank you for your time. Again, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, anytime. And I'm so grateful for what you guys are doing too. And honestly, anything that we can do to help push things, that is my goal. As much as I've become, it's kind of funny becoming the chair of the party when my birthday, if you look at the birthday book, is the day of defiance. Not that that makes any difference, but I've definitely am very defiant about things. And my defiance comes with like a lot of heart and a lot of activism. And it was very interesting becoming the chair and then suddenly being the establishment when you're working in a defiant way. And sometimes that defiance is literally just shifting people's perception and bringing those things up over and over again until they're so comfortable talking about them that Medicare for all, that forgiving student loan debt, that free college, that the Green New Deal are just part of our consciousness and part of the conversation. But I think we definitely need more and more people involved. This space has kind of actually even opened up with COVID. I hate to say it because more older people are less technologically able to navigate this kind of information, sharing, that it's actually opened up for younger people to get involved. And they should. They need to. It's our future.
Yep.